Good evening, everybody. This is DrHack, and it's time for us to start studying the Sicilian Defense together, with white, of course. But before we do that, I have to ask you a very important question. And that question is, have you ever hit a rating ceiling before? Have you ever come up to a rating that you just couldn't seem to get through? You'd come up to it and you bump off of it, and you come up to it and you bump off of it. About half of the time when people come in to see me as a coach, this opening is actually what's causing that. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so look over here in the database with me. And this is the Masters database. So FMs, IMs, and GMs, all titled players. Almost half of them, 46% of them, will play back the Sicilian at you if you play 1e4. Amateurs don't behave that way. I know why they're doing that, but I'll tell you in a minute. When we go into the amateurs database, let me just go down and take just the raw beginners. And we're using the Blitz data pool because this is the biggest data pool on Lichess. They only play back the Sicilian, these raw beginners, 6 out of 100 times, 6%. Let me slowly dial that up for you. When they get to be 1,000, they're playing it 9% of the time. When they get to be 1,200, 13% of the time. It's getting higher and higher, isn't it? Now 16%. They get to be 1,600. Now they're playing it 20% of the time, 21%. They get to the 1800s. It's almost equal to the E4, E5 openings now. 26% of the time they're seeing that. And when they hit 2,000, now it's the most popular opening in chess for that pool of players. Why is it that it gets more and more popular the higher rated you go? And think about what that's doing. You're seeing this opening with increasing frequency the higher you go up the ladder, which means as soon as you hit the point where this opening is taking more rating points than you're getting from playing your opening E4, E5 better, that's when you hit the ceiling. Okay, and the only way to progress would be to increase your abilities with the Sicilian defense and win more games with it. Okay, now here's why I think the Masters play this so often. And it's because the Sicilian offers lots of opportunities for the higher rated player to outplay the lower rated player. Therefore, somebody who's already more seasoned at the game is going to win more often than somebody who's new. And that's why they study it so much, because that's what made them masters in the first place. And they are just so good at it. Now, of course, you don't have to do that to become a master, but 46% of them agree with me that this is the best way to beat us patzers at the game. Okay. So I am going to get into this one, and we're going to learn how to beat this as white and just smoke him so that our rating can continue and steadily climb through the ranks. Let's do this. So the first thing I'd like to do for you is I'd like to try to characterize this opening for you, because I've been seeing these moves almost for 40 years now. Let's pretend like I didn't say that. That's a lot of time. And what I think I've noticed is that white tends to attack first in this one. And that's because, if you want to really get into it deep, that's because white can develop a bigger space advantage than black can. He can make more squares behind his pawns if he wants to, in order to develop his pieces, which means he can aim them better than black can, faster than black can. And so as the game opens the first time, white's attack tends to be the first one to be played, which means black is trying to stall that attack out and then play some kind of a counterattack. And the way that he might do that, the thematic way that he might try to do that, is to get rid of white's center pawn advantage, which means he's trying to play the move f5 or d5, something that can get rid of this guy. And that means that if we can stop those moves from happening, this one is really dangerous, isn't it? Moving the f-pawn, it's letting your king have a diagonal. In most parts of the Sicilian, this doesn't happen. It happens in a few places like the Sveshnikov, and if you want to get into names, the Pelican and that kind of stuff. But most of the time, what black is doing is they're trying to play the pawn to d5 as their thematic breaking open the game kind of move, so they can start their counterattack. So as white, we should be aware of that. We should be cognizant, and we should stop it if we can, or slow it down as we develop our own first attack. Okay, and you see that in the database, the masters are playing this knight to f3 move 82% of the time. Now, When you play knight to f3 on the second move, you are opening a can of worms the size of the galaxy, okay? Because now black has the opportunity to take this game in many different directions and play this many different ways. And understanding each of them and playing them well for us takes years to do. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing we did in the Ruy Lopez. We're going to give a nod to this. We're going to say this is the expert way to go. And as you get better, maybe you'll want to pick this up. But we can climb the ranks all the way easily to 2200 without having this idea. Okay? And what we can do then is we can have the idea that we would like to stop this d5 move from happening, and let's put the knight on c3 first instead. And that doesn't happen nearly as often in chess master games, does it? But it still is reasonably good. Okay, no problem. And so we've now done something. We did a thing, and black has a chance to play something. Now, the second thing we're going to talk about here is we're going to talk about which piece is more valuable again between these two. Because in the Ruy Lopez, we decided beyond a shadow of a doubt that this bishop was much more valuable than the knight, because it had attacking possibilities on this diagonal and on this diagonal, and it had attacking possibilities on this diagonal in the Ruy Lopez. Remember, it could wrap around and come back all the way to c2 and be a good force later on in the game. In the Sicilian, because this pawn hasn't moved yet, that's not true. The bishop sitting on this diagonal here can often just get shut down completely. And now it's not a good piece at all, and it's not doing much there. Now you can still use it there, it's possible, but it's not as good, right? And if we put the bishop on b5 and he manages to chase it around, back to here, perhaps it can't even do a good job on this diagonal. And so what you're left with is the idea that this bishop has to work somewhere else in order to be good. And if you're going to attack the king side, you only have one spot left, this diagonal from b1 to h7. This bishop is not nearly as good in this opening as it was in the Ruy Lopez. As a matter of fact, I think this knight is more powerful than our bishop. Long term, I think this knight is more useful. So if we can trade the bishop for the knight at any point in this opening, I think we should. That's exactly a 180. That's opposite of what we've already decided in the Ruy Lopez. So now we have to keep these two things separate. When they don't move this pawn forward too, right, this bishop is not as good because it cannot attack down this diagonal as well. And therefore we'd love to trade it off. And you look down the list here and you go, why is it that white's winning 40% of the time when they go up to try to trade off the bishop, and on all the other moves they're not winning nearly as much of the time? There is something going on here that we need to get and understand. This bishop is not as good as the knight in this one. And why is it that when black does anything except save his knight, he starts losing a ton? There's something to this, right? Okay, and here's what's going on behind the scenes. Let's play a random move. And let's get rid of this guy. And I'm going to take it back with either one. It doesn't really matter for our discussion here. We have to ask the question, what happens to this piece? And I think when we really understand this piece in context of what these pawns are doing, we'll understand that he's not very good. He's not very happy. Okay, and if this pawn can never move, like say our next move would be d3, then how does this piece ever play this game? He can move here, but if this pawn can't move, right, then the pawn behind it can't move. He can move out to here, but maybe we can play b3. And now if this pawn can't move, how does the bishop ever get anything done? Maybe we could even add another piece to that square to help defend should he play the pawn to d5. Right? Well, maybe then these pawns move forward and we bring the bishop out the other way. Maybe. But if you can shut down this one square with a move like h3 or f3, the bishop will never make it down this way either. So maybe it sits on e6, but that's doing the exact same thing it would have been doing had it been sitting on a6. That's not really helping, right? He still has to make this pawn move work. And so there's not a good job for this bishop until very, very late in the game. And this is what's giving white the advantage. This is why they're winning so much. It's not that they have to do anything from here. They just have to make sure that this bishop never gets life. And then they can play almost up a minor piece on the king side of the board if they want to. Okay. So we kind of get what's going on with that one. Great. We would love to trade the bishop for the knight. So let's take this move and let's play the better move for black. Okay, now, do we save the bishop? We've already decided that the knight is better than the bishop. So we go down the list of moves and we go, why is it that when white's playing a move that's not saving the bishop, they're scoring better? It's the same reason. The knight is better than the bishop. Why is it when the knight takes the bishop that white is scoring a ton? We understand this now, right? We've got this. Cool. So that's the next thing to understand, that the difference between these two pieces is now opposite of what it was when we played the Ruy Lopez. I think that's all we're going to do for today. We're going to get very deep, very quickly into this and try to understand it from a strategic standpoint in the next couple of videos. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope it helps somebody. I'll see you in the next one. Take care now. Bye.